I want you to explain in very simple terms, what's the difference between riba, or the interest, and the profit?
So you have no riba or no interest because in our definition of money, we recognize the intrinsic value of money. We recognize the time value of money in the payments of zakat, for example, but we don't recognize the tradable value of money. So we consider money to be money not tradable or no premium added when you trade money. If you trade money, you trade a dollar for a dollar. The risk definition, the social responsibility factors, and the non-usury in general, all really are factors of this Islamic banking and finance system.
Is the price differentials, if you talk about car, you won't find much, right? What you get into the conventional, whether you want to structure Islamic, right? So those products are pretty much standardized. Then you talk about commodities, right? Commodity, and these are also very regulated products, right? Exchange, all these sources are available. So there's a benchmarkers out there, but then it goes back, Dr. Naik, it depends on the counterparties that what they are agreeing to settle that trade at.
Using LIBOR as a basis, whilst it does not sound right, I don't think it goes against the fundamentals of the contract itself, because you could refer to any other price, but you happen to refer to LIBOR, so it does not undermine the Sharia compliance of a particular product.
I was just going to say, I think we've hit upon one of the points that we look at in Islamic finance is the lack of standardization.
That's very true.
That creates the very opening for this question.
Exactly.
What do you use as a base? Is it okay to take LIBOR as a base or not? And until we can find that base level of standardization, I think that's one of the issues that the industry faces in terms of the challenges for the next step ahead.
We don't have today a benchmark that has been tested and accumulated value so we can use it instead of LIBOR. But now we at IOFI were trying to establish what we can call a profit rate type of indicator that would replace LIBOR, would replace those conventional benchmarking, because it's really a shame for us to use that and claim at the same time that we are operating on profit principles.
If you're structuring a transaction which is Sharia compliant, and Sharia compliant principles are there, then we track it separately. And we track it separately, we book it separately, and that's how we do it within JP Morgan, which is, it's a very good question, right? Because to your point, a lot of times conventional bankers get so confused, right? Do I need to get a whole new accounting system, right, to get Islamic banking going, buy $2 million, spend $3 million? No. You can segregate. You can segregate the processing operation as long as you structure it Sharia compliant and you have a means of process of tracking it. That's how you separate.
Some years ago, when the trees were cut down to create the palm oil plantations, that was then deemed to be un-Islamic. And I think having those constant tussle of is it or isn't it doesn't help the industry to move forward. And I think that's the big issues we need to grapple with.
That's
I think if I just, Dr. Shah, I think one thing, if people like yourself, the industry leaders, take one thing as a single priority, right, to really try to bring more cohesiveness and work with the different countries to bring a standardization, I think this will do justice to this industry.
We'll push for that. Let's move.
Can I just
yes,
say
Dr.
something?
Naik, just a brief comment.
Well, I mean, there is never a seminar on Islamic finance that does not talk about harmonization or standardization of Sharia principles.
That's true.
To be expected. And whilst the efforts of organizations like that of Dr. Ausha, the pursuing standardization, I think it's sometimes this lack of standardization is also overrated, because actually there is a great deal of convergence, albeit not standardization, in terms of the products that are being offered. And as I say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Increasingly, products that come from certain markets are being offered and being subscribed by investors who are particular about Sharia compliance globally. And that reflects increasing acceptance of the principles. And also, positive efforts are being made, I think, by various jurisdictions in terms of ensuring greater cross-fertilization of the Sharia scholars and exchanges of views and things like that.
We don't have much time, so I'm going to move back to you, Asif. What is sukuk?
It's an investment capital market product where you would raise funds against an asset, right? And that generally is for the long term and it's Sharia compliant, right? So in a simple term, this is how the sukuk is defined.
And I'll just clarify what I think a sukuk is, and it's an Islamic bond.
Yeah, Islamic
and
bond,
that's probably the easiest way to look
I
at it.
don't agree at all. It's like saying Sharia compliant alcohol. It's like saying Sharia pork, compliant pork. Bond is a bond. It's a conventional tool.
In terms of the products that are in the market, at the end of the day, what is important is the confidence and the trust that the investors ultimately have in the product. And Islamic or Sharia-based products, for those things are even more important because it's relatively new. People are not sure what they are. They don't fully understand. So it's very, very important that regulators or standard setters ensure that that everything is being done to build this trust because it's new, and sometimes people are scared of the unknown.
I think after the events of the last 2 years, there's a crying need for a return to some kind of value-based system for investments, and I think there's a huge opportunity for the Islamic finance field to fill both the needs from its own side of the fence, but also from the rest of the world as well.